The Greeks created the West. Through philosophy, democracy, and innovation, they forged the birth of civilization. Their legacy endures, shaping our world today.
Welcome, everyone, to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because, wow, we are tackling something massive. Our goal right off the bat is to just cut straight through all the modern noise and look directly at the foundational roots of the West. You know, it's a topic that's so often layered in intense, sometimes messy debate, but today, we're stripping all of that back. We're going to use the core data, the actual historical shifts, and some truly fascinating insights from classical scholars to understand the true architectural blueprint of our society. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for making sense of this massive topic. We are going to break it down logically. First, defining civilization. 2, progress versus tradition. 3, the Greco-Roman engine. 4, the democracy experiment. And finally, 5, the birth of reason. Part 1. Defining civilization. The necessary ingredients for a society to endure. So, this brings up a really fundamental question. What exactly makes a civilization? I mean, it's a word we throw around literally every single day without really thinking about the actual mechanics behind it, right? We just kind of assume it means a bunch of people living together. But historically and practically, it is way more rigorous than that. To actually endure, a group of people needs a very specific recipe. You know, you need geographical and agricultural stability just to stay rooted. You need a political structure, usually with some sort of fixed law code. You need a social hierarchy to give folks a sense of place. And yeah, you often need a standing military to defend against external threats. But here is the ultimate key. None of that, literally none of it, is enough on its own. A true civilization requires self-awareness. It requires a self-conscious realization of its shared identity and, crucially, a burning desire to memorialize itself. It has to want to communicate across time and space to its future self. And that deep desire to communicate leads us perfectly to this idea from David Butterfield. Writing is something we totally take for granted today, but think about it as a piece of technology. It is the absolute bedrock requirement for leaving monuments to our future selves. It's a necessary technology. Without the ability to actually lock down thoughts, ideas, and achievements in written language, a society is completely restricted to preserving merely an oral tradition. Writing is basically the ultimate tool for enduring across centuries. Part 2. Progress versus tradition. Reframing the debate around the West. If you tune into modern debates, you'll constantly hear people arguing that Western civilization can't really be Western because, well, some parts of it started in the East. Or they'll point to historical dark periods where our core ideals were completely abandoned. And fair enough. But our source material takes a very focused view here. It argues that while critics make these geographical or historical points, a lot of this debate acts as distracting noise. It's noise that obscures the actual intertwined intellectual structure of our world. To kind of solve that debate, the source looks at the very words we use. Take the word civilization, for example. Like pretty much all words ending in tation, it implies a process, right? A linear progression marching forward toward a final, perfect end goal, like a flawless, democratic society. But we all know history rarely moves in a straight line, which is exactly why the source suggests using a much more accurate term, tradition. Rooted in the Latin traditio, it simply means handing over. There's no guaranteed linear progress here, just the continuous passing down of core ideas. I absolutely love this metaphor. Think of the Western tradition as a giant relay race spanning thousands of years. Now, tradition requires two kinds of people. First, you need an active giver, someone extending their arm to pass on something they believe is worth preserving. But crucially, that baton is going to crash right to the ground if there isn't a willing receiver on the other end. You need someone who actually sees the value in catching it. Part 3. The Greco-Roman engine. The intertwining threads of the West. So who exactly crafted this baton that's being passed down? Well, the bedrock of the West as we know it is built on intertwined threads of Christianity, emerging from Judaism, deeply woven together with the absolute intellectual powerhouse of Greece and Rome. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens if you put these two empires on an intellectual weighing scale. Honestly, it tips overwhelmingly in favor of the Greeks. The Romans were sharp, they were clever, and absolutely vital. I mean, without Roman conquest, Greek ideas probably wouldn't have survived. Rome was the great preserver, but the raw, innovative genius. The unparalleled originality, the energy, the sheer joy in discovery, that was overwhelmingly Greek. Part 4. The democracy experiment. A surprising historical irony. Now, that Greek ingenuity gave us a lot of things, but one of them comes with a deeply fascinating, really counterintuitive truth. Just look at how this evolution builds across history. Back in the 5th century BC, Athens pioneered an ultra-direct experimental democracy. It was totally unprecedented. But here's the shocker. For the vast majority of Western history afterward, through the Roman, medieval, and even the Renaissance periods, democracy was actually not celebrated as a virtue. It was mostly ignored. It wasn't until the 18th century, during the Enlightenment, that revolutionaries trying to push back against monarchs consciously reached back thousands of years to revive the Athenian experiment. Democracy isn't some continuous unbroken line. It's an ancient idea that was literally put in a time capsule and reopened centuries later.
Part 5. The birth of reason. The sudden shift from myth to science.
We tend to assume humans have just always asked the big questions, don't we? But the source highlights that this wasn't actually a universal constant. It was a very specific intellectual turn that happened in the 6th and 5th centuries BC. The very word philosopher was invented by Pythagoras on the island of Samos. He needed a word to describe individuals dedicating themselves to asking these massive, unprecedented, cross-cultural questions about existence. So the crucial point is this specific year, 585 BC. Over in Miletus, a guy named Thales did something that changed humanity forever. He used inherited mathematics and astronomical knowledge to accurately predict a solar eclipse. Think about that for a second. For the first time, this massive cosmic event wasn't just explained away as the mood of the gods or some mythic story. Thales proved that the cosmos operated on rational, predictable principles. Many scholars regard this specific day as the actual dawn of science. And from that single predicted eclipse, an absolute intellectual explosion occurred. Within just 100 years of Thales, a handful of incredibly individual Greek thinkers completely rationalized our sense of self. They didn't just stop at the stars either. They invented epistemology, literally asking how we actually know what we know. They created ontology, studying the very nature of what existence even is. And by the time we hit 5th century Athens, Socrates shifted the focus to ethics. He started asking not just what the universe is made of, but how we as individuals ought to live within it.
And it wasn't just science and philosophy, folks. This rational explosion bled directly into the arts. Seriously, think about the entertainment you consume today. The source notes that there is almost no genre of artistic production thriving right now, from the tragedy of our intense dramas to the comedy of our favorite sitcoms to how we record our own history that was not innovated by classical Greece. They basically took the brand new technology of writing and used it to completely restructure how humans express the human experience.
Which leaves us with this final, truly essential question. We started by looking at tradition not as some guaranteed march of progress, but as a baton being handed over through time. The stability, the democracy, the reason, the arts, they have all been stretched out by an active giver across 3 millennia. And guess what? That relay race continues right now. So the question for all of us is, who is willing to see the value in picking it up, and who is ready to catch it next? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. Keep asking those big questions.